Shalom, shalom. It's Brother Yatazadak, hero of Israel. It's 1 Corinthians chapter 11 breakdown. Giving all honor and glory to Yahweh by Shem Yahushai, and double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone, teaching his truth and honesty and sincerity. And gotta give respect where respect is due. Now let's get right into it. It's 1 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 1. And it reads, Be ye followers of me, even as I also am of Hamashiach. Verse 2. Now I praise you, brethren, that ye remember me in all things, and keep the ordinances as I delivered them to you. So what is Paul speaking on? He's speaking on the ordinances that were delivered to the Church of Corinth. Now, to get the proper understanding, let's go to the etymology for ordinances in the Greek. So the Strong's Concordance is 3862, paradosis, meaning an instruction, tradition, from paradidomi, transmission. For example, a precept, especially the Jewish traditionary law. So this is what Paul is constantly referencing in the epistles. He's referencing the law and also the examples given by the prophets. Now, an example of that, before we move on, let's go to 1 Corinthians 10 and 6. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 6. And it reads, Now these things were our examples, to the intent we should not lust after evil things, as also they lusted. And reading on down, it's going into the various accounts written in the law. And these are the part of the ordinances that Paul was handing out to those at the Church of Corinth. Now, let's go back to the Greek, which is, and you can see by the various precepts provided under this etymology, you see that the word is translated into tradition, but it's in actuality it's referencing the law or the precepts or a precept. Now you have the precepts of men, which was the what the rulers of the Jews were perpetrating, and you have the actual precepts in the law of Moses. Now, as you can see, for example, you have Colossians chapter 2 and verse 8. Now let's go to that, just so we can distinguish what is what. It's the book of Colossians chapter 2 and verse 8. It reads, Beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit, after the tradition of men, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Hamashiach. So you have the traditions of men, or the precepts of men, which is what the rulers of the Jews, they were perpetrating with their traditions, and adding those traditions to the keeping of the law, which are also the precepts of men, traditions of men. Now, we can also go to Galatians chapter 1 and verse 14. This book of Galatians chapter 1 and verse 14. And it reads, and profited in the Jews' religion above many my equals, in my own nation, be more exceedingly zealous of the traditions of my fathers. So again, you can see why this can be translated as precepts or pertaining to the law of Moses. Not just like I had read in Colossians, referencing the precepts and traditions of men, which a precept is also a commandment, which in the Hebrew is mainly tazawah, which is a commandment. Now, but the point here is that these are the ordinances that Paul is handing out to these various churches, and you can see that this word can be translated as ordinance, tradition, and so on and so forth. Now, let's go back into the etymology and let's examine it a little bit more. So the transliteration is paradosis, reading, handing down, or over a tradition, an instruction, which the law is the Torah, that is the instruction. Tradition. So the other usage is tradition, which is what the rulers of the Jews were adding to the keeping of the law, their traditions. Now let's go down and read the Thayer's Greek lexicon. Now let's read the down here at number 2, the example given. It reads, a given over which is done by word of mouth or in writing. Tradition, by instruction. Narrative, precept, hence equivalent to instruction. Objectively, what is delivered, the substance of the teaching, of Paul's teaching, a plural of the particular injunctions of Paul's instruction. Now you can see this is referencing an instruction or handing down of a tradition or a teaching. Now it reads right here, well, it's kind of going off right here because so you can't go off of everything that is said. Here it says Josephus, again of the body of precepts, specially ritual, which in the opinion of the later Jews were orally delivered by Moses and orally transmitted in unbroken succession. So this is that's not correct, because there's several times when Josephus goes off. Now if you read on down, it says precepts received from the fathers, whether handed down in the Old Testament books or orally. So as you can see through the various examples and the what is written in the Greek, you have the accounts and you have the different usage, so you can distinguish when it's speaking about precepts of men and the precepts of the law, or the traditions of men and the what is commanded in the book of the law. Now, let's go back to 1 Corinthians 11 and verse 2. So that's the whole point. And mainly what this chapter is going into is into the further ordinances that he's delivering. Now, these are instructions given by Paul, not by Paul through the law. This is not taken out of the law, but these are just instructions, formal instructions that Paul is giving to the church of Corinth, as far as mainly appearance and how to look after one another. This is what this chapter is mainly about. But like I read in verse 2, the ordinances that he also delivered were the precepts of the law, as you can read in the previous chapter. Now in this chapter, he's going into the just the instructions that he's given them pertaining to that time. So not everything that Paul says is considered doctrine, and you can't apply it to today. Some things were specifically written to these individuals back then. So there's times when Paul expounds out the law, and there's times when he's giving personalized instructions to those back in this time. And I'll go into that and explain why he did these things. So let's go down to verse 3. 1 Corinthians 11 and 3. But I will have you know that the head of every man is a Mashiach, and the head of the woman is a man, and the head of Hamashiach is Yahweh. Verse 4. Every man praying or prophesying, having his head covered, dishonoreth his head. Now you have to keep in mind the mode of dress during the times of the Romans and the Greeks was different compared to what was customary for the Israelites during this time. So they were in a society where the mode of dress was completely different and sometimes completely off. Now let's look at some of the examples. Actually, let's read verse 4, then we'll go into the example. Verse 4, every man praying or prophesying, having his head covered, dishonoreth his head. Now this isn't actually in the law, so this wouldn't be considered a breaking of the commandment if you're praying or prophesying with your head covered. But the point that, and the reason that Paul gave this instruction was because of the way of dressing of these the mode of dress for these Romans and Greeks. The customary dress or garments were substantially different from what the Israelites were accustomed to. You have to remember, after the rule of Alexander the Greek, the whole known world during that time was Hellenized. So these type of garments were common in the society of the Romans and the Greeks. Now let's look at some of the examples. Here you have a Roman soldier's cloak. and also the various garments of the Romans and the Greeks. You had A, a hitched up tunic for working men, B, a tunic and a pallium, C, a tunic and a toga, and D, a painula or hooded cloak. So the reason why Paul was delivering these instructions was because it wouldn't be necessarily it wouldn't look too well, for a man praying or prophesying, having his head covered and looking like some kind of magician or you get the point. You know, this goes into abstaining from the appearance of evil. And also the cloaks in in the Israelite tradition historically, the cloaks were mainly for the women. So, and also the reason why the in the law when it states that well, let's go into the law, book of Deuteronomy, chapter select. See if I can get it. Book of Deuteronomy, chapter 22, and verse 5. The woman shall not wear that which pertaineth unto a man, neither shall a man put on a woman's garment. For all that do so are an abomination unto the Lord thy God. So the point here, why Paul said, every man praying and prophesying, having his head covered, dishonored his head, was because the head covering traditionally, and to distinguish the sexes and the genders, was for the women to have their head covered, and also to show their subjection to their male counterpart as them being the authority, and the woman the weaker vessel. And that goes into the different administrations in the body also, because, and this is the example Paul gives in the following chapter. So you have the strength, which is the man plays the strength, the role of the head of the household, because he has the strength and he ultimately is the head of the family. You have the woman, which is the weaker vessel, that is the administrator of the household. So you see, the man plays his role and the woman plays their role. And this is also going into the law. You had the clothing was to distinguish the genders and the sexes, male and female, and that is to avoid confusion. Now, as you can see from these tunics, you see this man looks like he's wearing some kind of skirt in example A. And example D, this individual here, he looks like some kind of sorcerer. So not only is it going into abstaining from the appearance of evil, but this is also going into the distinguishing of the sexes. Now, that's the whole reason why Deuteronomy 22 and 5 was instituted as a law, to distinguish the genders, and not only through the mode of clothing, but also through the mode of clothing is just the first part. Now, also the different duties that the male and the female is to play. So there was a separation, starting with the clothing, and and that goes hand in hand with the administration that the male, which is the head of the household, and the female plays, which is the if you go into the etymology for Eve, which going back to Adam and Eve, I believe the Hebrew is Hawa, which is nurturer. So that is the even from the beginning, these things were distinguished. The woman is the nurturer, and the man is the strength, the head of the household, because through the seed you have the strength of the that's how the for example, a plant. With a plant, when you plant a plant, you're using the seed, and you get that strength for that seed to grow through the plant. So even nature tells you that the male counterpart is the strength, and the soil personified as the woman nurtures that seed, not just in the womb or from the ground, but physically. So you have the different administrations separated even in the beginning of creation. So this is why that ordinance was given, 1 Corinthians 11:4. And it's more or less common sense. But the whole point is that go to 1 Corinthians 11:4. Every man praying or prophesying have his head covered, dishonoreth his head. So that's the whole point. Abstaining not just from the appearance of evil, but to have the order to show that there is an order and a separation, because you had these various Israelite foreigners and these practicing Jews gathering in these congregations, and they were separating themselves from the heathenish ways of the Greeks and the Romans, which is another reason why these followers were highly persecuted, because not only were they separating themselves from the hypocrisy and the unbelief of their brethren, mainly the rulers of the Jews, and those that did not believe in Yahweh Shai Mashiach, but decided to continue in their traditions and in their hypocrisy. And you had these Israelite foreigners that were coming out of the ways of these Greeks and the Romans. So this is another reason why these followers were highly persecuted, because they were coming out of those type of things. So that's the whole point for verse 4. And let's read on to verse 5. But every woman that prayeth or prophesieth with her head uncovered dishonoreth her head, for that is even all one as if she were shaven. Now what does that mean? Let's go into the various translations. Salakia. 1 Corinthians 11:5. But every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. It is the same as having her head shaved. So this is essentially what Paul's saying, and Paul doesn't he's not speaking literally in every single verse. you have to understand when Paul is using examples, and you have to distinguish when he's speaking literally and when he's not. It reads, verse 6, "For if a woman does not cover her head, she might as well have her hair cut off. But if it is a disgrace for a woman to have her hair cut off or her head shaved, then she should cover her head." So that's the point here. So now let's go back. So this isn't, well, let me just read it, just expound on it. 1 Corinthians 11:5, "But every woman that prayeth or prophesieth with her head uncovered dishonoreth her head. For that is even all one as if she were shaven." So again, the whole point of Paul delivering these instructions was for those at the Church of Corinth and these various congregations to have a separation of the and the order set on the genders of these various congregations. You had to separate the males and the females by their appearance. And reads in verse 6, "For if a woman be not covered, let her also be shorn. But if it be a shame for a woman to be shorn or shaven, let her be covered." So the main point Paul is delivering these instructions is that to distinguish the sexes in these various congregations, and to come out of that confusion that these heathenish practices were mostly being imposed upon these Israelite foreigners. Verse 7, "For if a man indeed ought not to cover his head, for as much as he is the image and glory of God, but the woman is the glory of the man." That's correct. And so again, these things, you can't find this in the law. So not everything Paul says is an actual commandment. He expounds on the law. There's times when he expounds on the actual law, and there's times when he's giving his own opinion, like I read in the previous chapters. There's times when he says, "I speak as a man and not of the Lord." And there's times when he's given specific instructions to those during during the time of the Greeks and Romans. So you got to separate and distinguish what is what. So it reads, verse 7, "For a man indeed ought not to cover his head, for as much as he is the image and glory of the Most High, but the woman is the glory of the man." So the point here is, you can even go back to the creation. Let's go to select. It's Book of Genesis, chapter 1 and 26, and it reads, "And the powers, the Elohim, said, Let us make man in our own image, after our own likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." So when the Elohim, which are the angels, had created man, they created man in their image, because ultimately it was done through the Most High. But you had the man created after the image of the angels, the Elohim. You had the Elohim created after the image of Yahweh Shai, and then you have Yahweh Shai created in the image of the Father. But the when man was created, they were created in the image of the angels, the Elohim, because you have men were given laws like a continuity continuity of life. So you had a certain time that men lived upon the earth. You had certain laws that were imposed upon them, mortal laws, like for example, a man has has to eat, has to sleep. They have bodily functions, and they were subjugated to those things. And when they were created, and the men were given laws, men were given instructions. They were given order in the image of the angels, because the angels, the Elohim, were created in order to obey the Heavenly Father's orders. And men were created and given that spirit, the emanation, emanation, Salakia, emanation, which is a spirit. And the spirit gave them the various senses through the body. So they were subjugated to the senses, to the bodily functions. Again, created after the Elohim, which were the angels of man. They were also given laws and created an order. You have male, female. You have the senses. They were given their different senses according to the gender. Like I went into, the man is the strength, the woman is the nurturer, the man is the head, the woman is the administrator. So these are the various orders and mortal laws that men were given. Things like procreation. So these aren't actual laws that you can read, and but these are mortal laws that that men were subjugated to when they were created. And again, this was after the image of the Elohim, because they were created in order. They had their order. So when they created man, they created them after their image, after their order, and were subjugated to their own laws. The angels are subjugated to the Most High. So everything has its order, everything has its law. Whether it be terrestrial or celestial. There are terrestrial laws and there are celestial laws. The Elohim, which are ministering spirits, and you go into the Hebrew, also the angels are referenced as as Kodash, which is also to be separate. So they were separated by the realms also. And you have terrestrial laws, which, like I went into, the senses, the feeling, the mind, the taste. And you have celestial laws, which are spiritual. So this is how, when man was created, they were created after the image of the powers. Just like you go into the creation of the earth, and everything was created, and as you can see today, everything is made up and composed of elements from the earth, which is how the Elohim had created creation through the Most High. Now, an example, we can go into Book of Wisdom of Solomon. It's like, yeah. I believe it's chapter 6. Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 7, and verse 17. For he hath given me certain knowledge of the things that are, namely to know how the world was made. How the world was made. How? Through the elements. Now, this is why the Elohim created man after their image. And this is why there is always an order, whether it be celestial or terrestrial. Terrestrial meaning earthly. Celestial being things that are not seen by the naked eye. And that is part of the elements. Because you can't see the elements through the naked eye. You can only perceive what is earthly. So you see everything has its order. Now, let's go back to Salakia. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and 7. Salakia. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 7. For a man indeed ought not to cover his head, for as much as he is the image and glory of the Most High, but the woman is the glory of the man. So everything has its order, whether it be earthly or heavenly. So this is why you have a separation. Even from the beginning, you had the Most High, you have Yahweh Shai, which is a creation of the Most High. He is the first begotten Spirit, and he is also an angel, but he is the first angel. Going back to Salakia. Actually, let's get Book of John, chapter 1 and 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Yahweh, and the Word was Yahweh. So in the beginning, when it says beginning, there you have to think of a starting point, and you have to remember God does not have a starting point, but the first begotten of the Most High, which is Yahweh Shai, he had a starting point. So he had to be created so he can create the Elohim, the powers that be in the celestial realm. And these are the things which created the creation that you see today, starting with the elements, and then with man. And man was given the order to multiply, to have dominion over the fowls of the air, and the trees and the plants, and the seeds of the earth. So you see, you don't necessarily have to go too deep. It's more or less common sense when Paul is giving the order of the Most High being the head, Yahweh Shai, man, women, and child. Or more or less, Israelite man, women, and child. So this is why you have the order. So in the beginning was the Word, which is the first begotten, Yahweh Shai Mashiach. And the Word was with Yahweh. So he was with Yahweh since the beginning. And beginning is the starting point for his creation, Yahweh Shai. And the Most High, Yahweh, has always existed. So he has no beginning. So Yahweh Shai did have a beginning, like everything else. This is why Yahweh is the head. Or like in some other people say the Godhead. And it reads, and the word was God. Because God in the Hebrew is also Elohim. So you have Yahweh, you have Yahweh Shai, you have the Elohim. And let's go to Genesis chapter 1 and verse 3. And it reads, and the Elohim said, let there be light, and there was light. So this is when the elements were given a spark. And there was a because in the deep abyss there is just pitch black. But you had to have the Elohim, the powers, spark up the elements to give it energy. And that's how light was created, thus dividing the light from the darkness. Now as you can read on down, you see everything else was created through elements. Everything you see today is composed of elements. So this is how the creation was made. This is why there's an order. So you don't necessarily have to take this out of the law as a pertaining to, when I say law, the first 5 books are the law. But I mean in the law that was given to Moses. You don't necessarily have to go there. You can go, if you have the proper understanding, you can go to the beginning, where the order is expounded on, not just through the accounts, but through the names, like Eve, the mother of all living, the nurturer. And you have the man, which Adam, or Adamah, which is earth. Because man was taken from the created from the earth, in the sense of through the coming out of the earth, just like a plant is planted and it sprouts from the earth. So let's go to another precept, then move on, just for the sake of time. Pretty sure I brought this out already. This is Second Peter chapter see if I got the right one. Second Peter chapter 3, and 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 4, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of the creation. So that is the beginning spoken of in 1 John 1 and 1. In John chapter 1 and verse 1. The beginning, or when you read in Genesis, in the beginning, that is speaking on the beginning of creation, not the beginning of the Most High. The Most High does not have a beginning. But Yahushua had a beginning. He's a creation. The angels had a beginning. They were a creation. Now, let's go back to 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 7. And it reads, "For a man indeed ought not to cover his head, for as much as he is the image and glory of the Most High, but the woman is the glory of the man." That's going into the being created in the image of the Elohim, because they had an order. The angels were created in the order. You have for example, in the book of Revelations, you have the angel that has control over the waters. You have an angel in control of the of the fire. So they have the control of the various elements. So they have an order, and man was created in order also. They were divided, man, woman. You have and the various offices, and you have the earthly laws that were given to man. So this is why everything has an order, and Paul is going into the order of man, woman, child under the Most High and Yahushua, because this goes hand in hand with appearance, and all these things you can read about in the law, which are the first 5 books. And this is also going into the separation from these heathenish practices, and to abstain from the appearance of evil. So verse 8, "For the man is not of the woman, but the woman of the man." So the man not being of the woman, or the woman of the man, because when they were created in the image of the angels, they were separated. There was a separation there. And men were given laws and order, just like the angels. Verse 9, "Neither was a man created for the woman, but the woman for the man." Again, because you can even go into, and it's common sense, you can go into the order of nature. You have plants, and you have the seed, and the seed grows through the soil. You have in nature, you have the with birds, with the fowls of the air, the male goes out to hunt, and the female stays in the nest and nurtures the eggs. So this is how man was given order when they were created, and the beast of the field. But I'm using the beast of the field as an example of the order that was given to all living. Verse 10, "For this cause ought the woman to have power on her head, because of the angels." So if you go into the Greek, powers is exousia, which all it means is showing a delegated influence or moral authority. Salakia, meaning when a covering. Paul is going into women having a covering on their head. Now, you read here it says because of the angels. Why? Because the angels were created with an order, and men and women were created in an order also, and were given laws to follow. Mainly the Israelites, they were given the laws to separate their clothing, to separate their genders, and the different offices. But man in general was also was given universal law, which universal law is an example, and I went over it in previous videos. You have a universal law, which is God abhors child sacrifice. He abhors homosexuality. That's a universal law. He's destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah because of the homosexuality that was committed there. And ultimately, that's the reason why Babylon the Great has to be destroyed, which is America. And because these are universal laws, this is why the Canaanites they were kicked out of their land, and their land was given to Yasharallah, to the Israelites, because of the abhorrent practices that they were doing. Things like child sacrifice. So these things were examples, and an example of universal law is also the separation of and the distinction of the sexes through their clothing. That is also universal law. So this is verse 10. For this cause ought the women to have power on her head. They ought to have a covering. Why? Because what Paul used as power, it says moral authority, to show their moral authority or their subjection to the male counterparts, to show that they are obedient to the order which the Most High created and gave to every man, woman, and child, which is a way to distinguish the sexes, not just through appearance, but through the offices that are given to the male and the female, not just in the family structure, but in society. And it reads because of the angels. Now, this is verse 11. Nevertheless, neither is the man without the woman, neither the woman without the man in the Lord. Why? Because in the beginning he created male and female. He created them. Verse 12. For as the woman is of the man, even so is the man also by the woman, but all things of the Most High Yahweh. Verse 13. Judge in yourselves, is it comely that a woman pray unto God uncovered? So essentially what's that saying? What that's saying is is it good that a woman prayed to God with her head uncovered? Verse 14, does not even nature itself teach you that if a man have long hair, it is a shame unto him? Why? Because these are what Paul is saying, and examples. This is why I use examples from nature, because this is all common sense. If a man goes out to war and he's got long hair and and a skirt on, these things are get in the way. So this is more or less common sense. So and this was also verse 15. But if a woman have long hair, it is a glory to her, for her hair is given her for a covering. And that's the reason women have a covering and should have a covering. Because their husband is their covering also, not just for protection, their safety. So these are all terrestrial laws that man and women were subject to. When I say man, I say man and women. Verse 16. But if any man seem to be contentious, we have no such custom, neither the churches of the Most High. So Paul's saying, a man can have long hair if they have it in locks or braided, because that's Samson, he had locks. The Nazarites had long hair. So Paul's saying that there's no such custom not to for men to have long hair in the churches, because that's an Israelite custom. If you were a Nazarite, you had to let your hair grow out. Samuel had to have his hair grown out because he was dedicated to the Lord. And Samson. But the point here is that the women naturally is supposed to have long hair and have a covering to show her subjection to the order of creation. This is why Paul said in verse 10, the woman ought to have power on her head, or the power of the delegation of showing more authority and delegating the order of creation, which her being under the man. So Paul is saying here, men can have long hair because the Nazarites did, but you can't take everything and apply it to today. Some things are all things are lawful, but all things are not expedient. You don't want to cause more confusion, but again, these things aren't law. So what I'm saying is not law. If it's not in the law, then it's not against the law. But you got to keep in mind that some things are not necessarily laid out word by word in the law, but they're distinguished, like I read in Deuteronomy 22. The woman shall not wear that which pertaineth unto a man, neither the man shall wear that pertaineth to a woman. So these things are going into appearance, and the reason why these laws were instituted was to distinguish the sexes. So during that time, there were actual Nazarites that could not cut their hair because they were under a vow. Now today, is that more or less common? That's less common today. So again, these things aren't against the law, but they're not expedient either in today's society when there's so much confusion being promoted, and the confusion of the sexes and their appearances. But again, like Paul says, I speak as a man. This is why man covering their head while they're prophesying or praying, that's not against the law, because you can't find that in the law. But this was something that pertained to that time. Why? Because of the way and the way of the appearance of the garments of Romans and Greeks during that time. Verse 16, but if any man seem to be contentious, we have no such custom, neither in the churches of the Most High. Verse 17, now in this that I declare unto you, I praise you not that you come together not for the better, but for the worse. Because there was a lot of tumults going on during that time, a lot of persecution to those that were in Yahushua and Mashiach during these various congregations. Verse 18, for first of all, when you come together in the church, I hear that there be divisions among you, and I partly believe it. Verse 19, for there must also be heresies among you, that they which are approved may be made manifest among you. So let's go to chapter 1 and verse 11. 1 Corinthians 1 and 11. So the divisions Paul is speaking on was in the beginning of the epistle. For it had been declared unto me of you, 1 Corinthians 1:11. For it had been declared unto me of you, my brethren, by them which are of the house of Cloak, that there are contentions among you. Because one was saying he was of Apollo, one was saying he was of Paul, one of Peter. So but like Paul said in verse 13, he said Mashiach is not divided, neither is a doctrine. So this is also another reason why you got to go precept upon precept, line upon line, here a little, there a little, to get the proper understanding. And sometimes you have to go to the beginning. And by the beginning, I mean the beginning of creation, so you can get the understanding. Verse, actually, let's go back to 1 Corinthians 11 and 11 and 20. When you come together, therefore, into one place, this is not to eat the Lord's Supper. Verse 21, for in eating every one taketh before other his own supper, and one is hungry, and another is drunken. Verse 22. I don't know what's up with that. What have ye not houses to eat and to drink in, or despise ye the church of God, and shame them that have not? What shall I say to you? Shall I praise you in this? I praise you not. Because again, Paul is going into the contentions that the various members were having. One was saying they were taught of this individual. Another was saying they were taught of this individual. Some were saying I was baptized by Paul. So they were already having divisions within themselves. So what Paul is mainly saying is that, and even like it said in chapter 10 and verse 3, or Salakia. Go to chapter 10, 1 Corinthians 10:24. Let no man seek his own, but every man another's wealth. So Paul was saying, to stay united, not just in the doctrine, but in looking out for each other, and not just when they're spiritually building each other up, but also physically, whether to look out for one another. Because you had this sect was highly persecuted during this time. So he's saying not to have divisions, and he's going into building up and creating the sense of unity among the various members. This is why he said in chapter 10, verse 3, he's saying that the forefathers of the Israelites, that they were all baptized and under that same cloud under Moses through the Most High, and they all ate that spiritual meat, which is that bread of life that Yahushua Mashiach said, which is the law, and that they were all baptized into that giving of the law. 1 Corinthians 10:2, and were all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea. Verse 3, and did all eat the same spiritual meat. Verse 4, and did all drink the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Hamashiach. So this is why Paul gave that example, and he's further expounding on the example he used there in chapter 10, in the beginning of chapter 10. Now, this is 1 Corinthians 11:20. When you come together, therefore, into one place, this is not to eat the Lord's Supper. Now, the supper is the main meal. Whether it be spiritual or physical, we can't say if Paul was speaking on a literal or a spiritual supper. Verse 21, for eating every one taketh before other his own supper, and one is hungry and another is drunken. Because you had a division in this particular church. One was saying I was baptized by Paul, another saying I was taught by Peter, another was saying Apollos taught me. But like Paul said in the beginning of the epistle, Hamashiach is not divided. The doctrine is not divided. Truth is not divided. So this is the example that Paul is going into, and he's using the a supper as which is the main meal of the day, and to promote that unity within this congregation. So this really, the rest of this chapter isn't really too deep. This goes into the also the same example he used in chapter 5 and verse 7, going into the Passover, and that Passover is ultimately to promote the unity of the body. And that's really what the Passover is about, because you're uniting yourself to those that are in Hamashiach, whether you're keeping the commandments and congregating or keeping the laws. You're uniting yourself to that body, and they're all under that same spirit, which is the Ruach Kodash. Now, 1 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 7, purge out therefore the old leaven, that ye may be a new lump. The old leaven is that outside influence, that old man, that you may be a new lump, which is that new man, as you are unleavened. So he was using this similitude for the body of the congregation of the those at Corinth, because unleavened bread, it doesn't have any outside influence, and these are what the true believers are ultimately going to be purged out of. They're going to purge that old influence of this world. This is what these Jews and Israelite foreigners were doing during this time. And Hamashiach being the Passover sacrifice for us. Because Hamashiach went through that chastisement. And what came out through all those things? The fruit of the labors, which is the truth. And the things that were given to us through the precepts, not just through the law and the prophets, but through the epistles and the accounts of Yahweh Shai Mashiach. It's 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 22. For in eating everyone taketh before other his own supper, and one is hungry and another is drunken. Verse 22. What have ye not houses to eat and to drink in? Or despise ye the church of God, and shame them that have not? What shall I say to you? Shall I praise you in this? I praise you not. For I have received of the Lord that which also I delivered unto you, that the Lord Yahweh Shai Mashiach, the same night in which he was betrayed, took bread. So this is going into them not having that division within the body, and to constantly nurture each other up, not just through the actual bread and water, or bread and wine, but also through that spiritual bread, that spiritual meat, which is the law, the prophets, which is what they the point of reference that they had during this time, during the time of the Romans and the Greeks. And this is that spiritual meat, and that bread of life, the living waters, which is the whole volume of the book. Verse 24. And we had given thanks, he brake it and said, Take, eat, this is my body which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me. After the same manner also he took the cup when he had supped, saying, This cup is the New Testament in my blood. This do ye as often as ye drink it in remembrance of me. Verse 26. For as often as ye eat this bread and drink this cup, ye do show the Lord's death till he come. Verse 27. Wherefore whosoever shall eat this bread and drink this cup of the Lord unworthily shall be guilty of the body of and blood of the Lord. Verse 28. But let a man examine himself, and so let him eat of that bread and drink of that cup. Verse 29. For he that eateth and drinketh unworthily eateth and drinketh damnation to himself, not discerning the Lord's body. Verse 30. For this cause many are weak and sickly among you, and many sleep. For if we would judge ourselves, we should not be judged. Verse 32. But when we are judged, we are chastened of the Lord, that we should not be condemned with the world. Why? Because Paul is saying that they are not condemned, these various Jews and Israelite foreigners that were gathering together during this time, because they weren't going to be condemned with those who had neglected the truth, which is ultimately those who were destined to deny Yahweh Shai Mashiach, of the Jews and these Israelite foreigners who refused to return to their former covenants and customs. Verse 33. Wherefore, my brethren, when ye come together to eat, tarry one for another. Verse 34. If any man hunger, let him eat at home, that ye come not together unto condemnation. And the rest will I set in order. So essentially, Paul is saying, just when you get together, just have a certain order. If you're coming together to eat or drink, then provide for the whole body and provide for each other. That is, if you're coming together for a convocation. If not, then just to nourish yourself at your place of dwelling. And also he was speaking on a spiritual nourishing, spiritual bread and spiritual drink, which they were to do as building themselves up through the scriptures. So what Paul is saying, he was giving a twofold example, and also referencing the Passover like he did in chapter 5 and verse 7. Because ultimately that's what a Passover is promoting. Unity in the body. Because even when you go into the law, when you were to slaughter the lamb for the Passover, you were also to if you had those that were dwelling among you, that were keeping the laws, you would share the Passover with them. So that's going into the unity that Paul is trying to instill in this congregation. But let's see if I can get a precept. And close out with 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 1. Now as touching things offered unto idols, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffeth up, but charity edifieth. So the point here is that Paul was telling this congregation to edify each other and to build each other up. Now you can be charitable with knowledge, and you can be charitable with physical nourishment, like actual bread and actual wine. But so the end of 1 Corinthians 11 really wasn't anything too deep. It was just mainly some instructions given pertaining to what was going on in this congregation, and also an example for the Lord's Supper, the Passover, the Pesach. But it is 1 Corinthians chapter 11 breakdown. Hear, O Israel, it's brother Yatazadak, giving all honor and glory to Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, Bashim Rakakodash. Say Shalom. Till next time. Abad Babal.